through this session is Eli Mandela from MasterCard Foundation.
Awesome. Good evening. I'm not going to accept that. Good evening. Still not accepting it. Good evening. My name is Eli Mandela. I work with the MasterCard Foundation, and it's a privilege to host you this evening. And as the saying goes, we've saved the very last, the best for the last. Yeah? So, I know we just did a small exercise and allowing us to get to know each other, but I would like us to do a little bit more. And this comes from my role as being a youth engagement partner at the foundation. So I'd like to request everybody to stand up, please. Yeah, we've been sitting for a while, so everybody up. Yeah, make space, make space. How many of us have heard of the funky chicken? Anybody in the room? Yes. Anybody else who's heard of the funky chicken? Yeah? So do you have space? Do you have space in front of you? Yes? Let's go. So it's very easy. We're going to count up to 10. Yeah? Using our limbs. Yeah? So let's start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to count until we get to 1, right? So let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can't hear you guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. Guys, I can't hear you. Come on. Yeah? You ready? Now let's go. It's gonna be really, really fast. Are we together? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 2, 1, 0. Thank you. All right. We have, again, it's an honor and privilege to host you this evening. And we have some really awesome guests today. Now, allow me to welcome Honorable Evans, Deputy Minister of Youth Sports from Ghana. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. MC, for a wonderful introduction. My sister, Honorable Rosemary, the Minister of Youth and Culture of Rwanda, Ministers of Commonwealth Nations here in present. Let me also take the opportunity to acknowledge the presence of Honorable Pius, who is the Chief Executive Officer of National Youth Authority in Ghana. Pius, stand up, let them see you. Our distinguished youth here in gathered, our media friends, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me take this opportunity to express my gratitude to my sister Rosemary and the good people of Rwanda for accepting to host this program and making it a success. I can say so far, so good. As I have been introduced by the moderator of this session, my name is Evans Opoku-Bobie, the Honorable Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports in Ghana, the Member of Parliament for Sunassee North constituency of Afro region of Ghana, and a strong, self-motivated, transformational, coherent, and passionate activist of the youth. I bring you greetings from the good people of Ghana, the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports, Mustapha Yusuf, who I graciously represent, and the good people of Ghana who have continuously thrown belief and support for youth development. I must emphasize that His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, the President of the Republic of Ghana, is a youth-made leader, and his personal commitment to prosperity, wealth, and general well-being of the youth is uncontestable. And I feel obligated that in this forum, I bring you his best wishes. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe strongly that on the search for the choice of personalities for the delivery of keynote address of our gallant and dear youth gathered in this auditorium, I was among multiple competent choices, and yet the axe graciously fell on me. I do not take this opportunity lightly, and therefore wish to register my sincerest gratitude for the honor. As I peruse through my invitation, I arrive at conclusions that my address will be centered around the theme taking charge of our future. The obvious choice of any country wishing to have the best of development, sustain it, grow, and ensure that prosperity is evenly distributed must seek to promote the youth as a development artist and then safeguard of the future. It is therefore not lost in me that I consider the theme and firmly support its proposition. May I ask all participants to kindly be on their feet and repeat after me. Please, let us shout in such a way that this auditorium will shake. So kindly be on your feet and just repeat after me. It goes like this. Certainly we are the future of Africa, and we take the charge of our future. So let's go. Certainly. Okay, thank you. You may sit down. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to deliver my address by focusing on contemporary issues such as youth as demographic dividends, youth and mindset, leadership and governance, education, training and development, globalization, migration, youth and security, ignorance, adventure culture, peer influence, and then entrepreneurship and employment. My speech will seek to perpetuate the realities of the above listed issues with pertinent reference to the youth, and by the end provide proposed solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2020 population and housing census conducted in my own country, Ghana, put the population of the youth above 35%. of the total population of the country. And I have the strongest belief that this situation is not different across Commonwealth nations, and I dare say across the world. These demographic dividends, which project member countries as the nations with the youngest population, must be significantly mainstreamed and strategically aligned with all development agenda of the Commonwealth states, if it is the Commonwealth states. It is in this light that the theme for this occasion is rightly placed. And I have to commend the proposers of the theme for this program. We need as people to ask very pertinent questions such as, 1, how do we harmonize, develop, and project this favor of the Creator for maximum benefit of member states? 2, how do we as people position youth as the driving force of the world? What strategic roles should we as a continent assign to the youth as a deliberate effort of preparing them for the future? What significant funding and resources are needed, and where do we find those resources? What are the necessary educational and development strategies needed for the youth of Commonwealth nations? Distinguished youth, we all must ponder over these questions and provide relevant solutions. I will not pretend to have specific solutions, but I believe strongly that the legacies that our forebears have bestowed on us give us strong resilience and the power of thought to begin to provide solutions of utilizing these God-given young men and women to us. The purposes of comparative advantage in international dynamics is knowledge, skills, and appropriate competencies. And I do believe strongly that we can make this possible with these young ones sitting with us in this August forum. Ladies and gentlemen, the mindset of every individual and generation has direct consequences on development. The level, character, and nature of mindset could have positive or negative implications for personality development, wayfaring, and other personality traits. The mindset of our youth, unfortunately, is quite fixated, conserved, and in many cases, content with little achievement. We need, as a people of Commonwealth nations, to motivate and encourage our youth to begin to think big and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, leadership and governance are the cornerstones of development of states. Countries that are shining have put together deliberate policies and strategies for the creation of meaningful successions into all kinds of leadership positions and governance levels. The youth of member states lag behind their counterparts across the world in their involvement in key leadership positions and their participation in governance. It is even more worrying in international dynamics when we are not able to function as expected. The trend must be addressed if member states are serious about their future and has been envisaged by today's theme. Distinguished guests, education, training, development are key in the overall human development index. The educational content and contexts in our member states remain conservative, rote learning, dependent nature, and largely built low self-esteem. This must be reviewed to give way to a more enlightened, motivating, job creation, oriented human feeling, and the cohesion and centralization of the environment within development. This is significant, typically, and must continuously be part of our formal and informal discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, the level of education and training must provide room for creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. The current situation in many member states is that our youth are trained or got trained in search of jobs and being employed. I must say that this trend, if allowed to sustain, will destroy the foundations of entrepreneurship bequeathed to us by our ancestors and will continuously create a substantial gap between employment and unemployment. Our efforts as people must be geared towards self-reliance, and these must start with the youth now. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the advancements of technology has brought communities, countries, and continents closer than ever expected. However, the globalization presents pros and cons, which must be continuously and consciously analyzed and projected for the solution of identifiable problems. When issues and circumstances of globalization become obstruction and obstacle to development, then they must be reviewed. The youth of Commonwealth Nations must be consciously guided, directed, and motivated to carefully analyze global trends and accordingly fall in line, transform or abandon completely texts and contexts that are found unsuitable and inappropriate for their development and taking charge of their future. Associated with globalization is the awareness or otherwise of the nature of other communities, states, and continents. As a result of pressures such as unemployment, hunger, conflict, development exclusions, the search by the youth of Commonwealth nations perceive better conditions remains high. The compelling, dehumanizing conditions faced by some member states, illegal migrants across European Ocean amidst inappropriate routes and dangerous modes of transport are not only worrying, but also insulting to Commonwealth as an association. We must collectively play a role of ensuring that the youth remain in member states and take charge of the development process. Distinguished guests, the youth of some member states supposed to be the best resource for socioeconomic development, unfortunately, are hugely involved in various forms of crimes such as money laundering, drug peddling, illegal mining, fraud, cybercrime, and in the Ghanaian parlance, Sakawa. This phenomenon results in large numbers of youth incarceration, insanity, permanent disabilities, and in some cases, death. The overall consequences of this situation is underdevelopment of many member states, the minimal human capital availability, and the loss of image and integrity. This canker needs to be addressed. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to progressively descend my address by providing the following suggestions. 1, in order to benefit from the demographic dividends of the youth, we must begin or continue to harness the formalization of youth groupings and the internal and external linkages of the youth first to themselves and also between the youth and the elderly generations. This will bridge the gap and provide enabling environment for close fertilization of knowledge and experiences. 2, the anthem of promoting can-do spirit among the youth of Commonwealth nations must be intensified as an encouragement tool for self-confidence and self-motivation. This must be consolidated with the spirit of volunteerism, selflessness, and patriotism. 3, it will be rational and highly rewarding if we could, as a people, formalize mentoring and coaching of the youth in all spheres of life. We must identify, develop, and encourage role models of our own. We must seek to review and standardize our educational curriculum to allow for easy flow of the youth within the Commonwealth in pursuit of education. The current differences in the educational structure sounds inward and does not promote coherent and common purpose learning of the youth. Our system of training must change from rote learning and colorful certification to skills development and hands-on training focused on employment creation. 5, additionally, we must seek to create linkages among the youth of Commonwealth nations through knowledge transfer, targeting tourism. Knowledge transfer, targeting tourism, cross-culturalism, and peer shaping. This will promote common identity of our youth. The purposes of employment of the youth must be broadened in the current circumstances, where the youth concentrate within their own countries in search of jobs has become problematic and indeed unacceptable. I would like to encourage the youth to search for employment globally, as their certificate obtained from various institutions in member nations are of global standards. Migration by all standards is unavoidable. However, it must be well programmed and streamlined in accordance with international practices and norms. Our youth must be given the appropriate migration orientations and resources to undertake decent, safe, and acceptable migration. Ladies and gentlemen, let me emphasize that Commonwealth Youth Charter will forever remain white elephants if member states do not take relevant concrete actions to operationalize it. I would therefore entreat all of us to continue to play advocacy roles in our various countries to ensure that all administrative and legislative structures are invoked for purposes of operationalizing the Commonwealth Youth Charter. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by making a passionate appeal to the youth that we must take an irrevocable vow of ensuring that our destiny for our development is squarely in our readiness to seek for righteous opportunities and humbly, strategically position ourselves to take the advantages for prosperity, self-reliance, and national as well as continental development. Our future is the future of Commonwealth states, and we are determined to make member states brighter and brightest of the world. Thank you so much for the audience.
All right, we're going to change gears. Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for your wisdom. We're going to change gears for our next session. And we have two really, really awesome speakers that are going to join me here. And they're both leaders within the education space. Allow me to welcome on stage Miss Shabana. Shabana is the president of SOLA, the school she co-founded while still a teenager. She was born and raised in Kabul. Shabana finished her high school in the US through the State Department's Youth Exchange Studies program. She then enrolled at Middlebury College in Vermont. In 2008, as a student at Middlebury, that's when Shabana co-founded SOLA. Please, as she comes on stage, please welcome her. I'll still go on introducing her. Shabana is a 2011 magna cum laude graduate at Middlebury College with a degree in international studies and women and gender studies. She holds a master in public policy from Oxford University, and she was awarded an honorary doctorate from SOAS University of London. In 2019, she received an honorary doctorate from Cedar Crest College in Pennsylvania. So welcome, thank you for joining us. We also are joined by Veda Sunassee. Veda has spent over a decade in several roles at the African Leadership Group, starting at the African Leadership Academy before later serving as the founding dean of the African Leadership University in Rwanda. Veda, during his sabbatical, he started near Delta that works with C-suites and corporates as education leaders, and he's currently serving as the ALU's CEO. So we are really, really pleased to have both of you join us. Yeah? So again, like I mentioned, this session would like to hear about your journey. But we have lots of young people that are hearing about all of these really great things you've done, and they're wondering what happened there. Yeah? So I would like to start with you, Shabana. Why do you do what you do?
Thank you, Ali, and it's a pleasure to join the stage with you and to be here among you all. I think the answer is very simple. We unfortunately live in a world today where we have more than 250 million children, the majority of whom are girls, who are deprived of an opportunity to be in school. And this is 2022 that we're talking about. And in a way, with all the progress and development in the world, it's shocking that we haven't managed to figure out a way to provide equal access to children across the world. And I think most recently, I do what I do because my country has become the only country in the world where girls' education is now illegal. So that's one way to answer. But a bit to elaborate a little more is I was born and raised in Afghanistan. About 20 years ago, when the Taliban's first regime when they were in power back then, they had made it illegal for girls to go to school. And so I was incredibly fortunate to be brought up in a household where my parents valued education and educated me and my sisters at a time when it was illegal to educate girls. And obviously they did that secretly. So I was brought up in a household where we knew that the greater risk in our life was not getting an education as opposed to getting killed. So it's with that that I grew up quite privileged and quite aware of my privilege and wanted to make sure that I extend that to others. So my education was given a purpose, and I was brought up in a household where my father, who was a general in the army, and my mom, who was an educator all her life, they always talked to me and my siblings that we go to school, we study for a purpose. And in my household, that purpose was to serve others. people who don't have the same opportunities as we do. And so as I continue to gain access to better opportunities and eventually went to the United States where I did my undergraduate studies, it was the last straw in a way, where I was so overwhelmed by how lucky I was that I couldn't just keep that to myself. And so I started SOLA as a way to, in a way, feel less guilty about my own luck and privilege, and really wanted to make sure that more youth in our country, especially young women, have similar opportunities and be able to use their education and skills to build our nation.
Awesome, thank you. And on a light note, some illegal things are not that bad, right? In
yes,
your
we
case,
we can talk
education.
about quite a lot of stories though.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Veda, you're at the ALU, and you guys have a very big mission. Why are you there in the first place?
Thank you. Before I answer that question, I just want to say it is such an honor to be sharing the stage with you, and thank you for sharing your story. Such an inspiration to see the work that you do. If I may sort of borrow a quick thread from there, talking a little bit about my own sort of journey, because I also wondered, why am I personally in education? When I went to university to study mechanical aerospace engineering, which I did for 2 years and quit, then became a political scientist, which I then quit, became a social entrepreneur, which I then quit, became an educator. But I think when I look back on my journey, there is a common thread as to why education became something that's so important to me. I grew up in a modest neighborhood community, and when I look at how I got lucky and privileged over the course of my life when, obviously I was a decent kid in school, but then from opportunity to opportunity, I could see how I could skip a few rungs of the ladder and get to where I am today. But that was not the case for many of the people I grew up with, the people I played football with on the street. When I look at our journeys today and ask myself, why am I where I am and why are my peers where they are? And I think it is because education was such a big enabler and gift, and I don't take that for granted either. And it's been, again, speaking of privilege and luck, I was very lucky to land at the African Leadership Academy, 12 years ago, which was founded by Fred Swaniker, who unfortunately can't be with us today. And I had zero intention of being in education at the time. And I actually remember I got there on a fellowship program, and I told them when I got in, I was like, guys, do not even think about putting me in a classroom. I'll do anything except be in a classroom, because at that point I felt I was done with education. I was jaded with education. But what it really was I was jaded with elite education, the way it was delivered to me for most of my life. While I thrived in it, I was also never felt in my skin in it. And that set me on a journey with the African Leadership Group for the last 10 years in trying to be rebels and trying to redefine the way we think about education, especially higher education, right? I'm not going to mention data that has been shared throughout the course of the day as to why education is so critical globally, especially on the continent, especially in higher education, where only 8% of young Africans who finish high school end up in university. There's a massive gap on the youngest continent in the world, where the median age is 19.7 in a population of 1.2 billion people. That tells you a lot about how many young people are just waiting to be able to get access and opportunity. So we were trying a model that we hope will really disrupt the way the old system has operated, which I don't think serves the needs of our continent or this youth. I mean, look at them. Everybody is hooked to the internet and to a technological device. So how can we think about education kind of like in this way, right? Where we just sit and we profess and we talk at people without having them engage in the process. And that's sort of what we're trying to do differently in the group. But that's a story for another day.
No, and I see what you're doing here. You're asking me to start engaging. So I'm coming to you guys, yeah? And there are a few things that both of you have mentioned in terms of your journeys as, in your journeys, leadership journey and your careers. One of them you mentioned is quitting. And the other one you mentioned is around the illegality of education in the country that you're coming from. I'm very curious to know, when do you know to not quit and to quit, right? Especially when you are in a very difficult position, right? So I'm very curious from your journey, and I think when you look at lots of young people that we have here, they are running the different organizations, they are activists in different ways, they are advocates, and sometimes the environments they are working in are pushing them to quit. When do you know when to quit? What are some of those values that push you not to quit or to quit, to move forward? I'll start with you, Shabana, and then go to you.
I think another way to look at not quitting or is in a way to pivot, right? And SOLA in a way is a great example of that. When we initially started SOLA back in 2008, this was when I was still in college, SOLA was a scholarship program. The idea was that we would identify talented Afghans, focus more on Afghan girls, but generally Afghan boys and girls, prepare them for success in US schools. And so then on the other end, we would identify opportunities in US high schools, boarding schools, and colleges and universities, and bring these young people to the US where they will get access to qualified education, continue on to university, etc., and then go back to Afghanistan where they would often be the highly skilled Afghans in whichever profession they chose to focus on. And then that was 2008. And then in 2011, the US government made an announcement that they were going to withdraw the US troops by 2014. So they announced a timeline for withdrawal. And what that did was it created a sense of anxiety amongst young Afghans, especially Afghans who are engaged with Western countries, especially those who are studying in Western countries with the hopes of returning to Afghanistan, realizing that if the withdrawal means increased insecurity, that their lives would be at risk. So more and more Afghans chose not to return to Afghanistan. And so it was in 2011, and by the way, also the Taliban started making statements that in the West you may have all the fancy watches, but here in Afghanistan we've got all the time. We will wait you out. And they use it as a strategy to recruit more foot soldiers. And so we were all paying attention to how the Taliban were responding to this, what was happening, how people were responding to this announcement, and what was happening with the international community. And it was in 2011 when we started talking about, reevaluating what are we doing as an organization. Are we contributing to a brain drain? Are we becoming a vehicle through which the best and the brightest of Afghanistan leave the country for opportunities outside of the country? Are we hurting Afghanistan through this? And these are some difficult questions to ask, because if you're really committed to the success of your program, look, we are sending 60 students or 100 students to these different schools. You want to continue to focus on that. But this is where pivoting becomes critical. So that was one critical time for us to pivot. It was then when we decided that instead of sending young Afghans to access quality education outside of Afghanistan, why not bring quality education to them in Afghanistan? And that led to the evolution of SOLA from a scholarship program to a boarding school. And what that gave us then was even more opportunities for innovation within that space. Creating a physical space and safe, nurturing learning environment in Kabul city that allowed us then to draw students from some of the most remote corners of Afghanistan, girls from villages and districts across the country where they often did not have opportunities to continue, let's say, beyond 6th grade, or girls coming to us from highly insecure areas that was constantly contested between the government and the Taliban insurgency at that time. And every time the Taliban took over that district, girls were not able to go to school, so there was a constant disruption to their learning. So we focused on bringing girls from those kinds of communities to the school, and that became the new SOLA. And then finally and quickly, which kind of makes it as why here. Then came last year, the US government made another announcement to this time unconditionally withdraw US troops from Afghanistan. And that was another point for us to really evaluate the responsibility we hold towards the community of SOLA students, families, and our colleagues. And we knew that it was only going to be increasingly irresponsible to operate as the only boarding school for girls in the country, given the increased insecurity and unpredictability of the political situation in Afghanistan. And we were looking at opportunities to conduct a year-long study abroad program for our entire community until we figure out what's happening politically in Afghanistan. And we were looking at mostly neighboring countries where we would want to take our study abroad program. And really out of the blue, Rwanda became a possibility. Quite fortunately, we were welcomed quite quickly to Rwanda. And when Kabul fell to the control of Taliban, which surprised and shocked the entire world, I was in Kabul that day. We managed within a few days to evacuate our entire school community outside of Afghanistan, and we safely landed in Rwanda on August 25th of 2021, and 4 days later we resumed classes for our students. Wow. And so, thank you. So what it was this idea of pivoting in the right time, but you can do that by really making your mission the central focus. Our mission is to educate Afghan girls. It was, it is, and it always will be to educate Afghan girls. And so when you stay focused on your mission, but you also pay attention to your surrounding, yes, and that enables you to pivot at times when it's necessary.
So it's not quitting, it's pivoting.
Yeah.
So tell us, you've had many pivots.
Whether it's in personal life or even through the work that we've done, I agree. It's never about quitting. Even when you leave being a mechanical aerospace engineer to become a political scientist, it's not really quitting. You're really pivoting. There's a book called Designing Your Life by these two professors who teach at Stanford. And in the book, they talk about this idea of you can't really connect the dots by looking ahead. You can only connect the dots by looking back. And when I look back on our journey, whether it's my personal journey or the journey of the African Leadership Group, the dots make perfect sense, right? And you do need to have, you talk about the values required, you need to have courage like they've demonstrated to be able to take the hard decisions. Similar to you, our vision is very clear. We are on the journey of developing the next generation of African leaders, and that does not change. We started with a model in Johannesburg, South Africa, where similarly we had a program where we bring in the best and the brightest from all over the continent, give them a remarkable education in leadership and entrepreneurship, and then we export a lot of that talent to the rest of the world. Thankfully, a significant number of our students do come back, but we do end up losing quite a few. But listen, I believe in human beings' right to pursue better life options as well, and that's perfectly fine. But we do have a continent that is in dire need of its talent as well, right? So this is actually where the idea, partly where the idea of the African Leadership University came about. The reason we have to export a lot of our talent is because there are not many quality higher ed options on the continent. So we came up with the idea of this university. And if anybody has watched Fred Swaniker's TED Talk, where he talked about we're going to build these 25 campuses across Africa, 10,000 students each. We started with 2, one in Mauritius, one in Rwanda. Quickly realized that even that model is still sort of not going to get us closer to our mission. And we've kept sort of we've kept being resilient. You talk about values. I think resilience is so critical. We've kept having the courage to pivot when necessary, and adapt your strategy, adapt your model, and the resilience is even more important because the world around you is more often than not resistant to change. So when you want to push new ideas, it doesn't always mean that the world is necessarily willing to entertain those ideas very easily. I loved hearing our minister asking for a 4-day week earlier, which I think is a brilliant idea to explore. How soon we can get to that, I'm curious to see how they will respond to that, right? So I think resilience, courage, and I'll add to the mix growth mindset, because if you stay fixed, you believe that, you get so stuck, and so if you fall so in love with your own original idea, I think there's huge danger there, especially when the world around you doesn't necessarily allow that idea to lead. Or if there are other reasons why you need to actually pivot, as she absolutely rightly said.
Awesome, awesome. It's not quitting, it's pivoting, and you need a few values. So coming back to everyone here, I know some of you or all of you have burning questions, so I would like to take 3 questions. People are going to raise their hands really fast. We're going to take those and then get responses to those. Do we have any questions? All right. As people are thinking about them, then I'll go ahead and ask another question. Do we have questions?
I think they're ready for dinner.
I'm going to give you a last chance. Huh? We have one behind there. We have another one there. Do you have a third one? Or go ahead. Say your name and then ask.
Thank you. My name is Erison, and I'm from Rwanda, a student at Kepler, where I also dabble as the student guild president. So I've been listening to the speakers, and obviously there's a lot of inspiration to draw from their journey. In 3 words for both of them, how would they describe their journey from where they started to where they are as of now? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I like that it's very brief and straightforward. Next speaker. Next question, sorry. Yeah. Keep it brief, say your name.
Hello, my name is Mary from Rwanda, and I think my question is around the methodology of learning, especially around creativity. So knowing ALU, I've interacted with a lot of students from ALU, and one thing that is well known about ALU is a creative way of learning. Okay, so my question is, what has been basically the impact of using creative methodology in learning? And why I'm asking this is because, as you can see today, we've had a lot of keynote speeches and a lot of guests from the Ministry of Youth and Sports. So in my disappointment, in the entire program, there's not been any discussion around how we can utilize the spaces like sports into the youth development. So my question comes back into like the creative way of learning and development. And in most of the youth and sports is a match made from heaven. You can tell from all the ministries that I've presented today, it's Ministry of Youth and Sports. So my question is, how has the impact of creativity had at the ALU? Perhaps sports can be leveraged on that as well.
Thank you, Mary. So I think we can take those. Yeah.
The first question was 3 words, yeah? I'll say learn, pivot, learn. I'll add a 4th one, pivot.
Thank you.
You want to take that one and then we take the second question?
Sure. I think, so the 3 words to describe my journey, I would say incredible unpredictability. I would also add to that luck, and add to that also an incredible amount of fulfillment.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you. Maybe you can take the sports.
Yeah, so around, couldn't agree more with you, by the way. I think we need to, bring the conversation to definitely sports, the creative arts, the arts in general. I'm a strong believer, very passionate, avid. I'm a self-proclaimed artist myself, so I'm with you through and through. And I think we've tried to infuse that in our, learning approach as well, right? Because, one of our learning philosophies is that learning has to be fun. There's no reason learning cannot be fun, right? So if you start with that as a principle, then whatever you design as a learning program, as a lesson plan, as a class session, right, you're always remembering at the back of your mind that one of your guiding principles is that learning is fun, One other principle for us is that learning is social. Learning doesn't really happen not that you can't learn on your own, but learning is generally social. All of us, learn a lot better in communities, right? So, again, keeping that as the back of your mind as a learning principle, we've always made it a point to design and craft our learning model around peer learning. So one of the things that, and there are a number of ALU students in the room, they'll tell you, from day one, we force engineer them into collaborative problem solving, into, a lot of sort of fun experiential learning that we do. And to the extent that we can, we also try to, bring creativity into the co-curricular programming as well, right? So when I was at the campus in Mauritius, I started an arts festival because there was there's one thing that this continent is endowed with is creative people. There's no shortage of that, right? Like I feel like arts is in our DNA, so there's no reason why not to create platforms where that art can actually come to life. So that's one of the things that we also try to do in our learning environment, is to create these platforms where we have arts at ALU where our students are able to engage in different forms of creative arts as well.
Thank you.
I think for us, creativity has been really central to the success of SOLA in our creating a learning environment. We knew that we wanted to be an Afghan-led, Afghan-run school, meaning that we, even for many reasons, but especially for security reasons, we needed to make sure that our school was led and run by Afghan teachers, faculty, staff. And we knew that we would run into some challenges when we wanted to really centralize a student-centric approach, especially when your teachers themselves have not been through that system. How do you break that barrier, at which point? And so we relied so much more on experiences outside the classroom. The Honorable Deputy Minister of Ghana also implored us to break away from rote learning and focus on skill building and so on. And honestly, a lot of that happens outside of classroom too. So for instance, when a student comes to SOLA, the very first person she meets is her big sister. And because our focus at SOLA is to bring people from across the country, different ethnic groups, different linguistic backgrounds, etc., we might, for instance, we will make sure that a girl coming from southern Afghanistan has a sister, a big sister from eastern Afghanistan, a girl coming from western Afghanistan has a big sister from northern Afghanistan, and vice versa. And it really makes a difference for their experience. And it's a two-way process. The big sister feels a sense of responsibility towards her younger sister, but the younger sister also knows that she has a peer who is significant in her experience and in her learning. I will give you two more short examples that will give you a sense of how we have dealt quite creatively in providing a great learning environment. When we first became a boarding school, finally in 2016, I needed to put together a cohort of faculty in addition to putting together a cohort of students. And like you just mentioned, arts, in addition to sports being quite critical to a creative learning environment, I reached out to a few artists who never considered themselves teachers to consider becoming a teacher at SOLA. And I remember one particular conversation I had with a really established and respected and celebrated artist. I asked her to consider becoming a teacher, and she said, "But I'm an artist. I spend my entire day in a studio, and I paint and I draw, and I'm creative. I am not a structured teacher." And I said, "Be creative and unstructured in that classroom at SOLA. Be our artist in residence if you don't want to call yourself a teacher." And she fortunately listened to me and joined us, and as a result has instilled a really strong love for arts in all of our students at SOLA, to a point where our students use arts as therapy. When they came to Rwanda, we'd been through an incredibly difficult journey. through the airport with the evacuation. We gave our students art supplies, chalks, basic stuff, and they started painting, drawing, just as a way of, going through therapy here. And one last example I will mention is we had very tight space, but we still prioritized exercise and sports. In a very narrow space, we purchased a few bikes. In the first class, one of the girls came from the first national, women's national biking team, and asked her, very simple, teach your sisters how to bike. And she encouraged the rest of her classmates to get on a bike, and within a month, the girls between class and in between sessions, they would get on a bike, even if for a few minutes. Same thing with yoga and stretches. Every single year, our 6th grade class come in and we encourage them to do yoga or exercise, and they are so embarrassed to be like stretching, and in a country where they're told to hide and cover and don't speak loudly, don't laugh loudly, we would ask them to essentially do the opposite. And they would be so embarrassed in the first few weeks. Every year, a month later, they come to us and say, can we play music while we do yoga or while we exercise? And it adds to that learning environment that you can create in a school.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, there is one thing, I'm just coming to the realization that we're coming to the close of our session, and I would like you to give us 3 parting words. Yeah, but and something else I actually wanted to mention as you were sharing, which is, I would say, music to my ears, that a lot of learning happens outside of class. So I think there is just a powerful message there, and I believe lots of young people that are in this room have gotten to this space because of some of the things they were doing outside of class. So it's really great to hear that you are incorporating that in the programs that you have. But again, every good thing comes to an end. Please give us your 3 parting words.
Does it have to be 3 words or 3 things?
Let's make it 3 things.
The first thing I'll say is, and I'm glad you brought up the question of values. I think it is so, and elements of that came up earlier as well in previous panels. I cannot mention enough how important I think it is to, as a young person, to really think about the values that drive you, right? And really be values driven, because somebody mentioned living in a VUCA world. Yeah, we do, and in a world that is so volatile, that changes so rapidly, so dramatically, where you have to upskill, reskill constantly. What is that rudder that's going to stay constant, right? And I think it has to go back to your values, wherever you draw your values from, right? But I think to be deliberate and intentional about having a value system is something that I'd say is very important, number 1. Number 2, I'd say take chances, right? We're too young to not take chances. Yeah, I know the youth is very angry with the previous generations for having left the world in a bit of a dire situation, but this is probably the most inspiring and optimistic group of people I have encountered, and I think that they truly, can change the world and take it to a much, much better place than we've left it for them. So take chances, and 3, remain resilient. It is so important to stay the course and not give up, because again, we live in times now where you can very easily get discouraged for a number of reasons. And take care of yourselves. I know you guys stress a lot, but self-care is very important.
I think I should have gone first, because it's difficult to, in a way, I agree with everything you said, and so in addition to that, what I would say is be a lifelong learner. Earlier you mentioned growth mindset, and I think the best gift that anyone can give themselves is to be a lifelong learner. Our world is evolving so rapidly, and for us to be effective human beings, really, we have got to have a growth mindset and be a lifelong learner. I think we should really stop looking at our learning journey to be the 12 years of school and 4 years of university, and it's so sometimes difficult to think that we are so engineered to think along those lines. Yeah, I think everything else you said I agree with and would have said, but I would add that as an addition to really remember. But then another thing to really add is, and it's relevant to our part of the world, both the continent of Africa and Asia, particularly South Asia, is that what I kind of mentioned earlier is we have so many millions of children who are deprived of an opportunity to be in school, and so much of that can be addressed through creative initiatives. You know, ALU being at the forefront here is a remarkable example. And we really need to think of a moral obligation that we all have towards addressing some of these challenges. I think about the 150 million plus girls across the world who are not in school today every single day. And I think about how we need to make sure that they are in school as soon as possible, not because we need to help them, but because we need their help. We need their help because we have got so many global crises that we need to address, and years of research shows that if you want to eradicate poverty, we need to invest in girls' education. If you want to address health crises or climate crisis, we need to get the girls in classrooms as soon as possible because we need their help.
Thank you. Thank you. Really, really powerful. It's not that because we want to help them, but because we need their help. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our panel. We invite you all to stay for a quick photo in the middle there. Yes.
All right. We are very privileged again to have Honorable Emma, one of the youngest ministers in the world, join us today. So please welcome her to the stage to give us a closing remark, and then hand back to the MC.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for welcoming me. A very good evening, everybody. Special greetings to Honorable Rosemary, the Minister of Youth, and my older sister from Rwanda. It's such a pleasure to be back here in Kigali, of course. I've been here for a while, but more importantly, to be here with all of you, the young people of the Commonwealth. I'd like to start my remarks by saying that there is a common saying back home in Namibia that I learned while growing up. And the saying is, and I quote, "Take the future into your own hands." Almost every adult that I encountered when speaking to them about my education, my activities at school, what I'm interested in, they would say the phrase, "Take the future into your own hands." And most times, the adults would say this in a way that would mean that, one, I should take my own future into my own hands by ensuring that I study very hard, which I did. They also said, stay away from boys and focus on your school so you do not get distracted and hopefully not fall pregnant as a teenager and have an unwanted pregnancy. Or they would also say that phrase because they would want me to get involved in social activities to gain new skills or improve on the skills that I already have. Well, for as long as I can remember, many, many young people I've interacted with have done the above. If they had an opportunity to go to school, they made sure they studied hard. And they took the future into their own hands in that aspect. if it means advocating for better communities, being advocates of the most vulnerable in their communities, representing themselves and other young people, voicing out concerns so those that have the ability to change matters can do so, they've done so by organizing, fundraising, getting an education against all odds, and becoming young mothers and fathers and picking themselves up again to ensure that they're able to get back into the game, even though they were not empowered enough with the right information to make wise decisions and better informed decisions where that is concerned, yet they were able to persevere. And in 2022, as we're sitting here today, we are talking about the same thing I've been hearing as I was growing up. And the theme being here at the Commonwealth Youth Forum, in a way for us to take charge of our future. And I believe rightfully so. We need, as young people, to take charge of our future. And in the words of Frantz Fanon, who in The Wretched of the Earth wrote, and I quote, "Each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it." And I wanted to look at this quote that I've read many, many times through Frantz Fanon's books and work, the term relative obscurity. It means having meaning or significance only in relation to something else, and it is not absolute. And Shabana, who was here earlier, spoke about how, and I quote, "My education was given a purpose." The moment education for girls became a challenge, she found her mission in the place she found herself. I mean, she even used the words that she feels privileged to have had an education. And how many of us can feel the same when the statistics say something else? And my heart really goes out to the young women and girls in Afghanistan who cannot get an education because it's declared illegal. And I've seen it with this year's BBC 100 Women, that the list of 100 women around the world was made up of 50 women in Afghanistan who are working against all odds to ensure that women and girls are empowered and are able to take up the space that they deserve. Coming back to the term relative obscurity, I'd like to reflect on something Veda said. And I must say, Veda, I was at ALU. I visited them. It was such a great experience. I can only commend the work that you guys are doing there. And of course, I'd like you to pass my regards to Fred. And it's something you said, Veda. You said, "I was able to skip many steps on the ladder due to my education." And I think Shabana put it so nicely that you didn't necessarily quit. You pivoted. And it reminds me back to something I read I think a couple of years ago, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when things just got really hard, difficult to educate, the health systems were failing. Young people were committing suicide more than ever before because of the mental pressures that came with the pandemic, with loss of education, with loss of income. And the quote said, "Do not quit, rest, and try again." And I think, Veda, that's what you did. I do not necessarily think you quit. I think you rested and you pivoted, like Shabana said, and you tried again. And I believe that as our generation of young people, in this relative obscurity of finding our mission and fulfilling it and hopefully not betraying it by taking charge of our future, we do not quit, we just rest, we pivot, and we try again. But the question still remains, what is our generational mission as we're seated here today? The forum has a wide range of sub-themes, speaking about climate change, speaking about education, about work and young people, talking about gender equality, talking about equitable and qualitative access to education, youth opportunities for us as young people. But then again, I'd like to add my own, which is young people finding a place in decision-making processes. And then this comes back to me reflecting on my journey. And I know Ellie was asking Veda and Shabana to reflect on their journey. And I quickly learned and I quickly realized that my own journey started with education. Having the ability to decipher concepts and principles and applying them across my life. And similar to something they said that they got value, not necessarily in the classroom, some of the life lessons they learned out of the classroom. And that is true for myself as well. I found myself doing a law degree at the university and hardly being in class because the concepts that I would sit in the class for 2 hours, I could gather myself. I could absorb myself by reading just by myself. And I needed more skills. I needed the skill of critical thinking. I needed the skill on how to pitch an idea in 3 minutes. I needed the skill on how I could think on my feet. I needed the skill on how to network and negotiate. And some of those skills I was not able to acquire in the classroom. I had to find ways outside of the classroom to acquire those skills. And I think as young people, as we discover our mission and we take charge of our future, we need to continuously upskill ourselves. We need, in many places and at many times, to be the expert in the room because they do look down on us. And as being a young minister, appointed at the age of 23, I get that a lot. So you must continuously ensure that you upskill yourself. And I've seen that working in the space of youth activism for quite a long time before I transitioned to government, that we have been doing exceptionally well in trying to discover our mission, in speaking up, in doing, in actively being part of conversations that we forcefully put ourselves in because we know that the decisions made today will shape our reality tomorrow. And that's our future we'd like to take charge of. But we cannot relent, we cannot quit, we just have to rest and pick up the tempo and pivot because our future depends on it. There is no room for us to give up. If we do not take charge today, it might be too late to do so. Therefore, I would like to end my remarks with a quote from a departed gallant of the African soil, Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara once said, and I quote, "You cannot carry out a fundamental change without a certain amount of madness. In this case, it comes from nonconformity, the courage to turn your back on the old formula, the courage to invent the future." Let us all have the courage from today and moving forward to invent our own future and take charge of it. I thank you so much for your kind attention.
A continued round of applause for Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for your kind words, and she's a testament to the fact that you're never too young to achieve your dreams. So thank you very much for your kind words of wisdom. What's up next? What do we have right after this?
Thanks a lot, Martina. So thank you, of course, to the Honorable Minister and the entire panel that just went by. So everyone, I just want to say a big thank you. Please, a big round of applause for yourselves for participating here, for being active listeners, for being active contributors, and for doing everything in your power. You know, one of the most important things that we see is the opportunity to network. And your network oftentimes becomes your net worth. So I always find one of the best ways to network is to work collaboratively together. And I see that as being so essential. My friends, we will be doing the city immersion at 7 p.m. But in the interim, we would like to break out into our youth action labs and take this opportunity to network through working together as a commonwealth towards common unity. And there's a commonwealth of knowledge sharing that takes place as well once we network. So we're going to do it in this room. We're staying in this room, so we're not moving out of this room. If the facilitators are here, facilitators, can you just raise your hand? All the facilitators, raise your hand who are in the room. I see a couple of them. Great. So we want to break up. We're going to section off. So we're going to go I'm going to name out the sections, and then we want everybody, as you were in your youth action labs, to break off into those sections while we just wait to enter into our city immersion. For all our specially invited guests, I would like to invite you all to join in any session that you see, or to walk around, see what the young people are talking about, or engage if you would like to stay with us. If not, we thank you for being here with us as well, but it's totally up to you all, and you all can see what the discussions are about. Of course, these youth action labs will inform our CYF and our plan going forward as well. So I'm just, sorry?
Thank you very much, Darian. So would also like to talk about the Kigali Night Run that will be taking place tomorrow.
Great, Martina. Why don't you share on that?
Yes, so there is a shared map. Let me quickly get to that.
And while we wait for that, I just invite you to look to your left, look to your right, you're noticing, and of course, smile with your fellow youth delegate here. Share a smile, and a smile carries a lot of energy behind it.
Yes, so tomorrow evening, another activity for all our beautiful delegates here in Kigali for the Commonwealth. So Kigali Night Run will be taking place on the 21st of June. It is going to be, I'm sure, if they could please share a map if there is one available. But if not, the starting point will be at Kigali Heights, and then we'll quickly circle around. So it's basically 5 kilometers, but we'll definitely give you more information on that. But it's just going to be a night of sports activities, engagements. This is an opportunity for you to run around with someone from Uganda, someone from Namibia, someone from Ghana, someone from Trinidad, and so on and so forth. So make sure to be able to show up and turn up for the Kigali Night Run, which is going to definitely be amazing.
And you have the opportunity right now to warm up for that Kigali Night Run by running to your set location for these youth action labs. So I want to invite everybody who's in governance. Governance, we're taking this section over here on the right-hand side in the stands itself. So governance, if you're in governance, you can head over there. I want to invite everyone, that's governance and the rule of law, that action lab. Anybody who is in that action lab or those action labs, you can head over there. Youth and human capital, we want you all to take the other side over there. So youth and action and human capital, you can head over there to your left-hand side. We want to invite trade, entrepreneurship, and employment to come down the right to your right-hand side here, right here. We want to invite technology and innovation to this side here. Sustainability to the middle section here. And health and COVID-19 to the back section of the room. So once again, governance and rule of law into the stands. We're going youth and human capital into the stands on this side. Trade, entrepreneurship, and employment right here.
All right, so as we quickly settle into our groups, I would also like to talk about the Kigali City Immersion that is going to be taking place this evening. So there are different sites and different places of enjoyment. There is one that is going to be at Gisimenti and Nyamirambo car-free zone as well as, so they sent you guys a link, all the delegates have a link, so just quickly apply to which place you'd like to be this evening, and you will be facilitated right after. So please fill in that link and let us convene right after this, but meanwhile, let us please enter into our different groups for a short discussion.
Thank you, Martina, and I know that you'll be taking your exit now, so I want to say a big thank you for joining us here this evening.
Thank you very much, Darian.
Any last words you'd like to share with the CYF delegation?
Let's just continue to take charge of our